Over in California, they passed a new gun control measure called a bounty law that allows citizens to sell companies for making guns. Yeah, it's probably not constitutional. Will probably be struck down by the courts, but bless their little hearts for trying. This is what you get with gun control. The story from Bearing Arms. NYPD doing God's work enforcing law regulating toys. Why, yes, the image you see on your screen for those watching is a gel blaster. It's a gel blaster. That's it. It shoots a little ball of gel that splatters and you giggle when it hits you. That's it. It's a squirt gun. It is effectively a squirt gun. Now, you're putting little gel beads in it and they hit you and it pops or whatever. Far from anything that could actually be considered a legitimate weapon. I suppose, though, you could put, I don't know, hot sauce in it or something. But for that matter, you could buy a super soaker and fill it with hot sauce, too. Well, this is it. The NYPD has celebrated taking the bead blasters off the street. Bravo, NYPD. Is this what y'all signed up for in the big city? That you wanted to put a stop to gun violence? And now you're going and rounding up these toys? Amazing. People are posting funny memes. Like there's one where police in Britain, I think like in Leeds or something, they're like getting these dangerous weapons off the street and they were holding a dirty butter knife that was like laying on the ground. It's like, dude, that's a butter knife. What are you talking about? Here's what you do. I figured out how to solve the butter knife problem, UK. Instead of people being given butter knives, you give them a rounded edge metal placard or card of some sort, rounded, of course. And you hold it like this and you can smear your butter that way. Because you can't stab anybody with a small rounded edge square, right? And you'll be able to spread the butter on your biscuits. They're taking the butter knives away. Here we go. And then, you know, let's read. John Petrolino for Bearing Arms says, I remember calling an FFL in one of the boroughs many years ago asking questions about transferring an air gun. And the FFL went on a tear, directed at me, mind you, about how they're illegal in New York City. I was in search of answers to a pile of hypothetical questions, and I didn't end up talking to an FFL in New York State, outside of the boroughs. The FFL I talked to laughed at me and said, you're asking me about having us ship a toy? Yes. When I was in Florida, I lived there. You walked in, and they had at Walmart just like air rifles, break barrel, right? You'd buy it. They don't even card you. There's no question about it. When I was moving back to the New York area, I didn't go back to New York directly. I went to New Jersey, but they were like, those are illegal up there, period. Completely illegal. And I was like, it's an air gun. And they're like, yeah, those are illegal. Just flat out. Now, maybe there's some kind of way you can actually get an air gun in New York. I think they're illegal, but they may just be restricted. He goes on to write, the laws in New York are screwed up. They're so screwed up, a famous court case that's been ignored by the state. They're so screwed up, a famous court case that's been ignored by the state occurred because of their own arrogance and disdain for civil liberties. Even though people in New York City have to navigate multiple sets of awful laws, it's okay because the New York City Police Department has their backs and is keeping them safe. While the Big Apple crumbles into a state of despair, highlighted back in April, emblematic of one of the mayor's staffers getting robbed recently, and the NYPD showing how tough they are on crime, we have more good news. Recently, the NYPD went out of their way to inform the public of the city's prohibition against bead blasters, also known as gel blasters. Yeah, I saw a video recently of a woman being shoved onto the tracks. Crime in New York is insane right now. It's getting worse, but rest assured, y'all over at the NYPD, you're doing a great job. And this is why I've often said abolish the police, because I'm done playing games, just outright done. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Stupid. There's no excuse for this. There's no reason for it. Now, I must stop there for a moment, my friends. When I talk about abolishing the police, I'm talking about the NYPD. The city doesn't want them. I mean, they do, but the people won't stand up to defend them. So you get what you want. And the police are too busy doing this. Look, a sheriff's department, elected law enforcement, I dig it. I've had nothing but great experiences for the most part with duly elected sheriffs. Now, there have been many stories of people who have been, there was one woman who I think she was from Minnesota and she fled to Iowa, got arrested for opening her cafe. And that was deputies who did that. Not perfect. New York City is different. It's a Democrat city with Democrat elected officials appointing Democrat cops to do things like this. Meanwhile, people are being beaten in the street. I watched a video of a woman standing on the sidewalk and some dude runs up and just clocks her in the face for no reason. Maybe if people could defend themselves, you'd have a much more polite society. Here we go. NYPD posts, bead blasters shoot gel water beads propelled by a spring-loaded air pump, making them an air rifle. Air rifles are a violation in NYC and are unlawful to possess. Violators found in possession of these will be issued a criminal summons and the weapon will be confiscated. Bravo. Bead blasters. Is that what it says? It's a violation to possess an air rifle in NYC under NYC Admin Code 10131B1. Unlawful possession of an air rifle. Why do you live there? Now, look, we have a lot of people on Timcast IRL, many of which live in New York City, and they're telling me they're leaving. So glad to hear it. If the July 21st public service announcement was not enough, the NYPD also went above and beyond to show their most recent contraband confiscation. And their own rendition of one of these things is not like the other. They say all three of these guns were recently removed from NYC streets. And despite their looks, only one of them is real. The other two are bead blasters. Possession of a bead blaster is unlawful. Oh, come on. If I would have to guess, I actually, I can tell the one up top is plastic. I don't know. This one looks like it might be real, actually. And this one looks like it might be a bead blaster. I'm not entirely sure, though. Now, fair point. When they say things like, we're going to get guns off the street if they're indistinguishable from a regular gun. Fair point. They look like regular guns. They're regulated in the same way. Unfair point, however, to us is that they should not be illegal, period. Y'all should be allowed to carry guns, whether they shoot gel or otherwise. There was a really crazy story in New York City. There was a music video shoot. And so they brought in airsoft guns. They have orange tips. They took the orange tips off of them for the shoot. Cops arrested them. You kidding, dude? They weren't walking around pointing them at people. They were making a music video with props. Doesn't matter, apparently, not in New York City. They're going to say, the absurdity of these posts has no bounds. What's actually going on over at One Police Plaza? Has the leadership over there gone so daft they think these tone-deaf posts are actually going to speak to the public at large? Are these posts supposed to be akin to elicit a similar reaction that the Who's running into the Grinch on the streets of Whoville have recoiled in disgust and fear? If someone is taking these posts seriously, they're part of the problem. And New York City can rejoice, knowing that their progressive nonsense has finally completely won. I actually invite the NYPD to offer their own commentary about the absurdity of not only the laws, but flaunting their epic crackdowns on this criminal element by reaching out to me, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I like bearingarms.com. It's a good website talking about your right to keep and bear arms. Now, I mentioned this story. It is what it is. It's simply put. Governor Newsom signs gun control bill modeled after Texas abortion law. Bounty law allows California residents to sue those who make, sell, transport, or distribute a firearm that is used in a crime. It's insane. So what about someone uses a car for a getaway? Are we going to be like Honda? Someone drove a Honda from the bank after it was robbed. That's your responsibility. I don't think this is actually constitutional. But more importantly, what matters is, can it even be enforced properly? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you an excellent thread from Rep. Thomas Massey. He says, every weekend I come back to Kentucky and try to purge my brain of the hypocrisy and stupidity I've witnessed in Congress the week before. Otherwise, it just piles up. It's noon on Sunday, and I still haven't purged the nonsense I dealt with in person this past week. Look at this beautiful photo from where Rep. Massey lives. I believe it's where he lives. Come back to Kentucky. He says, I heard the Democrats argue vociferously that a wrist brace is a bump stock. If there was any doubt of their profound ignorance, they removed it by displaying a poster of the wrist brace and reiterated it would facilitate full auto fire. Assault weapon because of a wrist brace. It's just so dumb. A wrist brace goes on your wrist and you can hold a pistol, stabilizing the weapon when you shoot. Now, some people illegally will use a telescoping retractable wrist brace against their shoulder like a stock to stabilize the weapon, as if it were a short-barreled rifle. This does nothing to simulate full auto fire in any way. But you knew that, didn't you? He says, I witnessed almost every Democrat on the Judiciary Committee call the most common rifle sold in the U.S. a weapon of war, and then heard them argue passionately that the Department of Education and the USDA needed these weapons of war. Well, they should have them, and so should we. I listened to every single one of them argue that firearms manufacturers should be liable for the acts of criminals, and follow that up by voting against removing immunity for pharmaceutical companies even when they are clearly negligent. Ah, yes, the vaccine. The argument is that many of these companies under the emergency provision were not liable for any potential damages arising from vaccine use or any injuries. No, if you sell a product, you're responsible for what that product does, period. Massey says, I asked the secretary if he knew what impact Biden's electric car mandate would have on the grid, and he did not, or he chose to ignore it. When presented with the math, he seemed unable or unwilling to acknowledge the magnitude of the electric car consumption. This is the best one, though, just to keep it on guns. He says, I watched them pass a bill on a party line vote that banned a weapon if it looked a certain way, but not ban that very same weapon if it looked a different way, while they assured the public that this would make them safer. So here's the issue. Thomas Massey brought up an extremely important point. What you see in the image is I believe it's a Ruger 1020. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a Mini 14. Duh. A Mini 14. They said this is banned explicitly. On the right, you can see the Mini 14 receiver, which is the functional parts of the weapon. Also banned explicitly. Then on the bottom, you see a Mini 14. The only difference is it has a rifle stock, not a retractable or telescoping stock. And that's really it. No pistol grip or rifle grip. That allowed. The receiver from that weapon, identical in every way to the other Mini 14 with the pistol grip, not banned. Makes no sense. They couldn't answer it either. I don't remember who Massey was talking to, but they were like, the pistol grip and the brace make it an assault weapon. It's more dangerous. Those are only for war, blah, blah, blah. What? Holding it with a rifle grip versus a pistol grip doesn't change very much of anything. It's just absolutely absurd. It's negligible, completely negligible. This one, you hold slightly differently, but you can still shoot in much the same way and has the same receiver. This is the issue we're dealing with. Massey makes it the point. The receiver is identical. So is it banned or not? They couldn't give him an answer. They couldn't. They didn't know. They said in the bill the receiver of the Mini 14 is banned because the Mini 14 with the pistol grip is an assault weapon. But then they said the Mini 14 with the rifle grip isn't banned, so the receiver isn't banned either. So it's both legal and illegal at the same time. Congress. Massey goes on to say, I could go on. This is just a sampling of what I witnessed personally and pushed back against this past week. I got a few more hours to get ready for more of the same insanity this coming week. I appreciate your support. Man. It's absolutely insane. So I can't see what this person wrote that blocked me, but someone said, if you can tell me why one of these rifles is so much more deadly than the other, I might listen to you. And you can see a Mini 14, and then below it, I believe they're both Mini 14 guns. Functionally the same. But you can see, but look at that magazine. The Mini 14 with the rifle grip can take the same magazine. It's interchangeable. At least as far as I understand it, they're interchangeable, same caliber and everything. Yet one's got a pistol grip and a retractable stock. But look at them. They're functionally the same thing. If someone were to take either of these weapons, they would perform identically. Identically. This is what we get when it comes to gun control bills. And this is why the New York City is going after gel blasters. Amazing. Bravo. I want to bring you to this story from Bearing Arms. Raskin ignores history in anti-2A rant during gun ban hearing. It's absolutely laughable. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Let me play it for you, actually.
Who's an able-bodied person. I'm not going to yield, but I'm coming to you right now. My friend from Texas, Mr. Roy, advances the so-called insurrectionist view of the Second Amendment, that the Second Amendment's purpose is to give the people the right to overthrow or fight our government or fight the police or threaten armed resistance if the government is somehow being unfair or unjust. This reading is totally, absolutely absurd and flies in the face of the plain text of the Constitution, which in at least 5 different places clearly forbids armed violent resistance to the government. The Republican Guarantee Clause in Article 4, Section 4 provides that the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or the executive against domestic violence. This was put in the Constitution specifically in response to Shays' Rebellion and armed resistance to the government of the United States, which the founders strongly opposed. Here's another provision the gentleman from Texas should consider before cavalierly suggesting in public that citizens somehow have a constitutional right to use arms against our government and our police. Article 3, Section 3, Clause 1 states, in the only constitutional passage that defines a crime, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Armed insurrection and violence against the United States is plainly making war against our government and thus is an act of treason. And I could cite all of the other ones. And what do they have against this? A quote from Patrick Henry, an anti-federalist who opposed the Constitution precisely because he thought it gave too much power to the federal government and didn't endow the people with a right of violent resistance against the government of the United States. That's not constitutional law. That's a constitutional joke. I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, let me answer that for you, Raskin. Levying war against the United States or adhering to its enemies. What happens when a sitting member of the United States government adheres to its enemies, provides, say, resources and access to one of our enemies while in government? What happens if someone in government uses their power in, say, the executive branch to empower themselves? Under Raskin's concept of what it means to commit treason against the United States, he argues, because I'm sure he hates Donald Trump, that if Donald Trump, as a member of government, used his governmental authority in a way that was damaging to this country, you could do nothing to stop him. Makes no sense, does it? Let's say Donald Trump on January 6th ordered the National Guard to go out and arrest members of Congress. Well, you're levying war against the United States. Who is? There's two elements of government here. Pick one. Let's say he said Donald Trump sent out the National Guard to arrest Democrats with the military. He says, you're levying war against. No. Far be it from you to stop Donald Trump from rounding up Democrat voters across the country because an act of government did it. It's the most psychotic thing I have ever heard. People in and out of government can levy war against the United States or adhere to its enemies. The purpose of the Second Amendment, as actually written about ad nauseum, in fact, to protect this country from enemies both foreign and domestic. So you mean to tell me, Raskin, that a nation that literally just used arms and militia to fend off a government and take control for itself didn't think that should be the case again in the United States if need be? Now, don't get me wrong. Many people who won independence didn't want to lose it. Shays' Rebellion, you say? I believe it was John Hancock who pardoned the overwhelming majority of those who participated in it. Pardoned them. Pardoned. They weren't charged with treason, or they might have been, but they were pardoned. He said, no, we can't do this. You see, that's leadership. We don't want war. We don't want conflict. So what happens when the people, if the government is for, of, and by the people, and the people have a right to keep and bear arms, and the people say, you corrupt elitists do not represent us and you are aiding our enemies, who gets to determine whether or not it's an act of treason? It's nebulous at best. So this idea that you can't keep and bear arms to defend yourself, absolutely insane. The insurrectionist view sounds like Raskin would have been a loyalist during the War for Independence, who would have been going, well, I serve the crown. Bro, this country is for, of, and by the people. That's it. If let's say everybody in government resigned and there was one person left, Donald Trump, does Raskin think then that we all have to just do what he says? That makes no sense. It's a stupid argument. There comes a time when criminals do criminal things, whether they're in corporations, whether they're acting as individuals or crime syndicates or cartels or members of government. And there needs to be an apparatus by which we deal with that. Now, if you have someone in government who's actively killing people, what do you do to stop them? If a sitting member of Congress pulled out a weapon and started attacking people, what would you do? No. You can't stop them. Are they not levying? Where's the line? Obviously, there are circumstances where people must use arms to defend themselves, no matter who you are and where you are. But this idea that it would never occur. Now, don't get me wrong. I think for the most part, it shouldn't. We're not in an era of violence. My point is simply that Jamie Raskin may come out at some time with a hammer and brutally attack someone. Do we just do nothing? You can argue, well, he's acting outside of the confines of government. Exactly. Yes, we understand the government for, of, and by the people should serve them. But what happens when people in government are committing treason? That's a crime. They should be arrested, charged, convicted, for which the penalty is death. How do you enforce that against someone who has surface-to-air missiles? You will need the weaponry capable among the people to do so, right? Right. So according to Raskin, the government can never, no one in government could ever, no, get out of here with that. Crimes can be committed by everybody. The reason police are armed is to be able to deal with the criminals and subdue them. That's that. But rest assured, under Raskin's leadership, you'll be in New York City unable to have even a gel blaster as a man runs up and punches you in the face or throws you on the train tracks. How about that? I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.